Boys and girls, yesterday you guys heard Mrs. Robinson read about e pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. And that's a good motto for our country because the United States is made up of a bunch of immigrants from many different countries to form our own country. So today our read aloud is titled A Little Giant Comes to America. And in this read aloud, you're going to hear about a man named Charles Steinmetz. And he is a man that immigrated from Germany here to the United States. And he came into the New York harbor. You could see right here is a picture of the Statue of Liberty. So that's what we're going to be learning about today. We will find out, the purpose of this is to listen carefully to find out why Charles Steinmetz immigrated to the United States and how his presence here helped the United States. So we will learn that today, but before we begin, I'm going to go over some vocabulary words with you. The first word is center. And center is a place where a particular activity or work is done. For example, Chris made a picture frame for his mother at the art center. And you guys know the word center. We visit the nature center in town and other places. So a center is a place where an activity is done. We're going to hear the vocabulary word interpreter. An interpreter is a person who turns speech from one language into another language. So back when all the immigrants came here, they came speaking the languages of their countries. If you immigrated from Italy, you more than likely spoke Italian. If you immigrated from China, you spoke Chinese. So oftentimes you needed an interpreter that understood that language and could transform it into a different language like English. This way, people that did not speak that language could understand it. Then we're going to hear the word liberty. Liberty means freedom. So the colonists in the American Revolution fought for their liberty so they would no longer be ruled by the English king. So liberty means freedom. And then we hear the word opportunity in this read aloud. An opportunity is a chance or a possibility. For example, Billy was very grateful for the opportunity to go to science camp over the summer and learn more about his favorite subject, opportunity. So we will begin by looking at this slide, which has Charles and other passengers eager to see the Statue of Liberty. And if you're eager, you can't wait to see it. So let's see. Look, there she is, with cries of excitement. The ship's passengers rushed to the railing. It was the summer of 1889 when this ship of European immigrants made its way to New York Harbor. In the distance stood the sight they had dreamed of seeing, the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of freedom and hope, welcoming them to their new home in the United States of America. There were many push and pull factors that led many people to come to America. Some wanted to own their own farms or businesses and knew that there was a greater chance of doing that in America than in their old countries. Others came from poor places where finding food or shelter had been desperate. It had been a desperate and daily struggle. They hoped that if they worked hard in this new place, they and their families could be sure to have warm meals and a suitable place to take shelter and call home. So those were a lot of the push and pull factors that made them leave their own countries and come here to America. Here is a slide of Charles in Germany. And remember, Germany is a country over on the continent of Europe. Among the passengers was a man from Germany who, although an adult, stood only 4 feet tall, and whose body, instead of growing straight, seemed to bend to one side. So he was a very short man, and he kind of stood a little crooked. So I bet you people kind of thought differently of him, unfortunately, because sometimes that's what happens. Let's see. His name was Charles Steinmetz, and he was a mathematician, or an expert in mathematics, and an engineer. a person trained to design and build machines, bridges, or buildings. He had left his home in Germany for 2 reasons. Let's listen carefully. First, he had trouble finding work in his homeland because he looked different. Many people did not understand that a powerful mind and a kind heart lay inside Charles's body. Second, Charles had written an article that said his nation's government was to blame for many problems. In many countries, writing such an article could land a person in trouble. One day, a friend warned Charles by saying, "My brother, who works for the government, says that the police are going to arrest you and put you in jail." So in many other countries, you don't have the freedom of speech like we have here in the United States. We have the opportunity to voice our opinions and stand up for ourselves. In a lot of other countries, especially back then, you didn't have that opportunity. So he didn't make his country very happy by saying that, and they wanted to put him in jail. Here's a slide of Oscar encouraging Charles to immigrate to America. To avoid being sent to jail, Charles fled over the Alps, a large mountain range in Europe, into the country of Switzerland. There, a friend of his named Oscar gave him a place to stay. Over dinner one night, Oscar said, "I am moving to America, Charles. Come with me. There you can find work and be free to write or say whatever you think." "If only I could," Charles sighed. "I cannot afford to buy a ticket." Oscar smiled. "My uncle moved to America and made a fortune. He's paying for my ticket. I wrote to him, and he has offered to pay for yours too." How do you think Charles felt when he heard that? I'm sure he was very excited and grateful for the help. I'm excited for him. Here's the next slide. Here's Charles and Oscar at the railing. Now, less than 2 months later, Charles and Oscar, along with many other European immigrants, were sailing into New York Harbor on the east coast of the United States. Charles was too short to see over the heads of the other passengers, but Oscar cleared a path for him through the crowd. A minute later, the two friends stood at the railing staring up at the statue, whose lamp lit the way toward the new homeland. Wow, so it took 2 months for them, well, a little less than 2 months. Remember, travel wasn't as quick back then as it is now. Beyond the Statue of Liberty, on its island in New York Harbor, was another island called Ellis Island. There were enormous buildings and docks on this island where ships could anchor and unload passengers. Charles thought, "That is Ellis Island. That is where the American government decides who gets to enter the country and who might be turned away. I know that only a few people are turned away, those who are dangerous, those who are sick, and those who do not have papers saying they can move to a new country. Will they let me in after my trouble back home? Will they look at me the way my body bends to one side and say I am too small and weak to be welcomed here in America?" So Charles was very worried that he wouldn't even have the opportunity to start a new life here in America, because even though we are a country made out of many, there were rules, and you had to be checked in at Ellis Island. They made sure that you were healthy. They didn't want you bringing any diseases here. They made sure you had a place to stay. They made sure that you were coming here legally. Here's Charles looking apprehensive in the immigration center, meaning unsure. Hours later, Charles stood in a huge room in the building called the Immigration Center. Long lines of immigrants waited to approach a row of desks. This is where the government clerks would ask questions to determine whether the travelers would be allowed to enter the United States. In another part of the building, doctors waited to examine the immigrants. Most people were allowed in, but Charles worried. What will I do if they turn me away? I cannot return home. If I do, I will be sent to jail. Finally, he reached the head of the line. A government clerk asked him a question, but Charles did not understand English. A clerk called over the interpreter, who knew many languages, including German. Using the interpreter to turn his English words into German, the clerk asked, "What is your name?" I'm sure he's feeling very nervous. Here he is being interviewed by the clerk. Charles said his name, and the clerk wrote it in a book. Then, without looking up, he asked, "Do you have a job waiting here for you?" "No," Charles answered. "Do you have any money to live until you find a job?" "No," Charles admitted. Now the clerk looked up at Charles and shook his head. "So you have no money and no job, and you speak no English." "I am sorry, but we want people who can add something to our nation." Just then, Charles's friend Oscar stepped forward. "If you turn this man away," he said, "you will be making the greatest mistake of your life." This is Charles Steinmetz, one of the greatest scientific and mathematical thinkers in the world. He may be only 4 feet tall, but he has many talents. You want citizens who can improve this country. He can. I am so sure of it that I will pay all of his expenses until he has a job. Wow. His friend Oscar sounds like a friend I would like to have. He really is standing up for him and trying to help him out. Here is Steinmetz hard at work, creating new technology. 2 hours later, Oscar's uncle welcomed Oscar and Charles to his big house in New York City. Soon afterward, Charles Steinmetz began to learn English and went back to work at a large company, using his powerful mind to invent useful new products. He helped improve the way electricity is carried through wires in order to bring electric power to buildings and houses. He helped to make electric streetlights possible and worked with the famous American inventor, Thomas Edison. Charles wrote books that helped other scientists understand electricity. He made more than 200 scientific discoveries. Do you think he was definitely someone that helped our country? I do. Here he is as an older man. These discoveries made Charles Steinmetz famous and earned him a great deal of money, but he never forgot how other people had helped him. While continuing his scientific work, Charles began teaching at a college near New York City. He refused to take any pay for his teaching, saying, "Teaching others how to create useful inventions is the best way to repay the United States for taking me in." Wow, so he was very grateful. His friend Oscar understood. He explained in later years, like so many others, Steinmetz came to America so he could help others with his talents and also to have a good job and a life for himself. That is why they call the United States the land of opportunity. Like many other immigrants, the move to America gave Charles a new chance to achieve something. Oscar continued, "I believe that each person brings something good to share, putting all of our talents together to make the United States and its citizens stronger and happier." But just think, that clerk at Ellis Island almost turned Charles away. It's a good thing they didn't. And it's a good thing his friend Oscar stood up for him to help him. Here's a picture of many different immigrants at Ellis Island. Charles and his friend Oscar were 2 of the 23 million immigrants who came to the United States between the years of 1880 and 1920. The majority of these immigrants were from the European continent. Like Charles, these European immigrants sailed to New York Harbor and were registered into the United States at Ellis Island. Sometimes immigrants' names were recorded and changed or shortened to make them easier to say. And sometimes, as almost happened to Charles, immigrants were turned away if they were too sick or did not have the right papers. Can you imagine what your life would be like today if Charles had been sent back to Germany? And to make this assignment disappear for today, you can answer that question. What do you think your life would be like if he was turned away? How do you think it would be? Maybe a little different. And there will be a journal entry to follow on another assignment. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's Read Aloud.